Alright guys, so the first thing I'm going to do is sew down the ear tabs. So I'm just going to take my threaded needle and I'm first going to sew the very edge, and I usually loop my needle. I can't explain it, so I really hope that you guys can see it really well. So I just loop it to knot it so that that first stitch is really secure, and then I go under and then I rest the thread over, like I lay it flat, and then I bring it under again to make another loop. Like I said, I'm horrible at explaining, so I really hope that you guys can see how I did that stitch. And I just do the same thing like for the whole frontal. That's my stitching for the whole frontal. That's my stitching for the wig. I do not change my stitching at all. So I'm gonna leave this part really slow so you guys can see it and really get what I'm trying to say. It's totally up to you guys if y'all want to leave the lace on or take it off. I prefer to leave it on because it's so much easier to sew it down. And on top of that, when I sew down my tracks, you're really not going to see any of that lace. So it's just easier for me to be able to have better control of sewing down the frontal when I leave the lace on. So I leave it on. Now that you've got your frontal all secured, you're going to start sewing on your wefts. What I like to do is I like to put my needle through the cap first and then through the very edge of the weft and then loop it so that the beginning of my weft is very secure, and then I knot it, like I actually tie a knot to secure it, and then I start sewing for the rest of the hair. Well, for this one I didn't knot it, but usually I'll knot it. So right here, I'm just going to sew through the weft for like the first 1, 2, or 3 stitchings to make sure it's secure, because I don't want my tracks to start getting slack too quickly, and I don't want the wig to unravel. So that's what I'll do. And also to keep my weft straight and make sure I sew it straight down the line and it's not going all over the place, and to also make it easier for me to sew a lot faster, I will pin the end of the weft to where I want to end the actual track. So yeah, I will start off from that back point. Like, how best can I describe it? It's like when you get lace wig caps and they have the little flap at the back. You'll start there and then you'll start sewing on the actual cap left to right. Yeah, that's how I do. So the very back, where you will see that little short space, and it will be like determined by 2 different lines, because you'll see a certain area sectioned off on that cap. That's where I'll sew to, and then when I get to the end of that, then I'll just knot again, because I fold my tracks. I barely ever cut my tracks. I always fold them, and I will sew through them and knot it to make it secure and as flat as possible. So you can see right here that I'm gonna keep going left to right, yeah, how I see fit. So after this section right here, I'm going to start going further and further out to the sides. Now when I get to the very edge of my caps, I like to sew all the way down to the last piece of the cap on the edge, and then I like to fold it, or sometimes, depending on how I feel, what I will do is I will curve it upward. But as you can see, this frontal is already taking up a lot of space, so I opted not to do that, and I just sewed right to the edge, and then I tried to get the flip over as flat as possible. And then I'll just keep sewing and sewing and sewing and sewing. gotten all the way to the top, I'm making sure that I'm laying my weft really flat over that piece of lace so that it lays down nicely and there's no lumps and bumps and that it's not poking out through the tracks. And I'm just making sure that you can't see it. So I'm just going to do the same thing I've been doing for this whole time, and I'm just going to sew it down with the same stitching. And I'm also sewing through the lace, and I'm also going to sew through a little bit of the frontal as well, so that it's like the frontal is attached to my weft.
Don't tell me that it looks so easy. Do you now? 'Cause I'm still struggling sweetly. Do you now? Don't tell me that it looks so easy. Do you now? 'Cause I'm still struggling sweetly. Do you
So now I'm just showing you guys the final look. Well, kind of, sort of. We're going to cut this part of the cap first. Just everything that you see hanging, just cut it. And be careful not to cut the actual thread, because then everything is just going to come apart. So yeah, that's how my part is looking with my hand underneath. So it's pretty much how it's going to look underneath my scalp. Now, if you feel like you've over bleached the knots, then just put a darker stocking cap underneath it and it'll look a little bit more natural. But thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next installment of this video where I actually put on the wig and show you guys how I try to make it look as natural as possible. Thank you guys so much for watching once again, and yeah, stay tuned for that next video.